Ancestral Sources Census Source Conversion for experienced users. Ancestral Sources version 7.5 introduced a new facility to convert census source records from generic sources to templated sources, and/or to convert census plain text sources into rich text. Users of Ancestral Sources may have created hundreds of plain text census sources over the years, and they might now want to convert them to rich text. So there's an example. On the left we've got plain text source, and it's been converted to rich text. That same facility can also be used to convert generic sources to templated sources. So on the left we've got a generic source with just a title, and on the right we've got a templated source with the various fields filled in. So this video will demonstrate how to use the Census Source Convert screen in Ancestral Sources. It will show how to convert a generic census source to a templated source, and it will show how to convert a census source using plain text into rich text. It will demonstrate as well how the available tools can be used for conversions to rich text that are not straightforward. Under the Tools menu, you'll find Census Source Convert. For this demo, I'm going to use this to convert generic sources into templated sources, and also plain text, source text, into rich text. But you may decide to only do one of those two things rather than just both. So you may decide, for example, to stick with generic sources but to convert your plain text to rich text. So the first thing I need to do is go to Options, and I have Use Template Sources ticked, so that will trigger the conversion page to assume I want to convert to templated sources. And under the source text settings, I have Use Rich Source Text and Notes ticked, and that will trigger the page into assuming that I want to use rich text and convert to rich text. So now let's go to Tools and Census Source Convert. Now at the top I have ticked plain text source text only. So this drop-down list here is showing only my sources which use plain text. I could have ticked to say I only want to see generic sources. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I could filter here by typing in say 1851, and it would only show me sources with the title 1851 in it, etc. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to choose the first one from the list. Ancestral Sources looks at the source that we've selected, and it tries to determine some information about it by looking at the facts and the citations linked to the source. And it's worked out that this is an England 1851 census. If it was wrong, we could select the correct one from the list here. It's worked out the reference ID, the date, the place, the address. We could click to view the actual image that's linked to this if we wished, and that would help us to check whether our text and so on is correct. And then we can go to Edit Source Template. So we only do this if we're wanting to convert to using templated sources, and you can see that most of the boxes here have been filled in. We could edit these if any of it was wrong. We could select the repository for this. We could enter in a collection and a URL if we wanted to, and we then click OK. So when we save this in a few moments, it will convert that generic source into a templated source. Now let's consider the conversion from plain text to rich text. At the bottom here, under the Original Source Text tab, we can see what the plain text looked like. Just text with some tabs to represent where the columns started and ended. And Ancestral Sources has looked at that and created this grid here. The first row of the grid is always highlighted in yellow to represent that that's the row which should have the column headings in it. And it's correctly filled in, I think, the data. It looks like it's made a very good job of that into the grid. On the left-hand side here, it's got some names. Now, these are the 6 people who are linked to this census source. And Ancestral Sources has tried to match those 6 names to the 6 names that are in the census grid. You'll notice that Thomas Jones there hasn't been identified because he wasn't added to the file. If I right-click there on the green section, I haven't got any other people to choose from. It's not that we haven't got Thomas Jones in our file. So if we now look at the rich text version down here, Ancestral Sources is using the default auto text template, which is the only template there is that comes with Ancestral Sources, unless you've created one of your own. And it's converted that grid into the auto text template, and it's looking pretty good to me. We could, for example, just widen the age column here so that the 1 week fits on, but generally I think that's good. Because it's identified the 6 people correctly, we then can have the hypertext link, which is an option that I have selected in the Ancestral Sources options. So it's done a good job of that. So I can now click Save, and that will convert the plain text to the rich text, and it will also convert the generic source to the template source. Now in Family Historian we can see the newly converted source, which is now a templated source. We can see that Family Historian has generated a new title for it, and all the various fields that we filled in are there, and also the text from source has been converted from plain text to rich text. Now, I've chosen this example to show you that sometimes Ancestral Sources won't be able to do a perfect conversion for you. If we look at the original source text, whoever recorded this census entry didn't put any titles in at all. They used tabs or spaces to differentiate between the columns, and Ancestral Sources hasn't really been able to distinguish very well where they should start and end, mainly because there's no column headings. So if we look now at what it has managed to do, it has correctly identified 6 people in the family. If I right click on this area here, perhaps on Joseph Phillips, we can see that the 6 people have all been identified, but there's this green icon here next to Thomas Phillips. So that means that it hasn't been able to recognise Thomas Phillips in the list of people's names there. And the reason for that is that Thomas Phillips is in our yellow header row. So effectively, Ancestral Sources thinks that Thomas Phillips is a column header. So the first thing we'll do is use the Insert Headers button, and that's inserted in our 1851 census headings. And now it has correctly recognised Thomas Phillips. All members of the family have been identified. So what we can now do is use our tools that are available to us across the top here to move the items around in the grid to sort out this formatting issue. And at the bottom here we'll be able to see the rich text as it changes to follow the grid above. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shift these relationships over like that. I'm using this left shift button here to move those things around. And then I'm going to, the ages are in the correct places there. I'm going to highlight both of those and move those left. And we are going to put the relationship there. We can see that Thomas Phillips doesn't have a relationship recorded, so he should be head of household. We'll move this occupation over and this age over, so we're just moving the things around until they're in the correct column. Like that. Now, here we can see we've got the daughter and the unmarried kind of merged together into one column. So if I click to put the cursor in between them and then click the split text right button, it will split at that point into two separate columns. So I can do that for each. And that's the condition column fixed. If I right click in the green header here above the yellow row, I can then, it gets highlighted, and I can then now do the fill gender column. So if I click that, it puts down there MFs, male, females, as appropriate for each person. The ages are all correct. The occupations, again, we can see that it's merged together, the occupation and the place of birth. So I'm going to click the mouse there and split to the right. I'm going to do the same there to fix that. So I think now we've got a pretty good transcript. So if I click that fit button down here, just to make sure that all the columns are of the correct width, I think now we're ready to save this. So the plain text has been converted to rich text. So even if we do get examples like this where it does a pretty bad job of converting it, these movement tools that we've got and the ability to insert new columns and delete columns and rows, etc., really help us to very quickly fix those issues. And you can always refer back to the source images if you want to ensure that you've made a good transcription of that.